Hello and a really warm welcome back to the channel. And since I made the last video up here, I must admit that time has been a bit short at the railway, but I did get half an hour the other night looking through some items, and I've decided that we'll this week have a short video taking a look at 3 different years in the life of one of my favourite little later Locos. Now when I say later, I'm going into the mid-70s, late to mid-70s. So it's our 252. So the 3 I've sorted out for us to look at today. Lovely picture on this 1978 box. And then we've got a 1977 example. And just behind it, a 1976 one. So we've got 3 years in the life of this lovely Hornby Loco, and we'll take a quick look at that and then maybe run a couple on the layout. Now just before I put the camera on the tripod, just here, this is the XO4 motor from the King George VI. I've just taken the brushes out and I just wanted to show you something I found quite quickly. Now I'm going to have a go at just cleaning it up and seeing if it makes any difference, but just look at that solder connection on the commutator there. That's a nice round good solder, as is that one. But when I just looked at it very quickly, this one, now it looks like that's been getting very hot, and maybe the solder has even melted and flung off. So is there a problem with this winding? Well, before I do any other tests on this, I'm going to clean up the commutator and brushes and just give it a little overhaul and see if that makes a difference. But next week I think we'll be delving a little bit deeper into that. But for this week we've got these really interesting 060 Locos, all in the same livery. You will see a slight difference actually when I get them out the boxes, which we'll talk about in a minute. But for now I'll just set the camera up so I can unbox each of these and show you the differences between them. Good, well I've got both hands free now to give you a look at these items, and let's start with a quick overview of the boxes. And maybe if I just stack them up oldest at the bottom, we can get an idea that the labelling hasn't really changed much, has it? 76, 77, 78 at the top. But you can see a difference in the black and yellow stripe on the 1978 box, and indeed we'll come to that in a minute. But if you just look at these 2 boxes, they're virtually identical. We've got this almost draftsman-like depiction of a Loco, really nice bold writing on an insert card, which we'll look at in a minute. But the 76 and the 77 boxes are for all intents and purposes the same. So I'm just going to tuck those 2 over there. When we come to the later one though, it's a really lovely looking thing. Much like most of the later 1970s Hornby packaging, we've got now a colour insert, quite a detailed drawing with items that aren't actually on the model, but it does look really good. A slightly plainer but nicer logo there, and yeah, it just says 00 scale models, and they've just changed this branding, which is the sort of yellow and black stripe. So the box is quite similar and in pretty tidy condition. So let's start 1976 first. So I'm going to see if I can slip this out. I'm going to try and do this all without pausing too much. So just an empty box with a cellophane display window. It does have a price tag on, I think. Taylor and McKenna, £5.50. So let's put the 1976 box just out of shot over there. Take a quick look at the card. R.252, and then there is 9300. So whether that's just a number for this inset card, I don't know, but it's a lovely thing. Now, first thing I notice on this 1976 model is that they've used a red ink on the stamp, which is something that you don't see on a huge number of these instruction leaflets. So R252, 26 of the 4th, 1976. So pop that over there. Now I'm just going to ease this out of the polystyrene. Let's just have a look. So just a normal polystyrene tray. It does have a number on the bottom. It says actually R041, so shares that with perhaps the pannier tank, or I'll have to look up the 041. In fact, just let me look over here, because just elsewhere in the workshop I do have no, the pannier is 048, so my mistake. So yeah, 041, have to check that later. So let's have a look at this model, and you can see we've got a really quite nice shiny version. I don't think I've shown a shiny version on the layout before, and indeed I've certainly not run this one. No evidence of white grease on the main gear, and lots of little bits of polystyrene stuck to the Loco. So I think this is probably fresh out of long-term storage. We got lovely little brass whistle and safety valves, and the Loco itself is looking in really nice condition, isn't it? Let me just see whether I can remove the body shell now. If you saw the last video, you'll know that it's just a little bit fiddly, so I'm going to attempt to put my screwdriver in quite carefully, see how tight it is. I'm just spinning it using my fingers on the shaft. So luckily that screw wasn't too tight, but it doesn't look like it's been out too many times before. Now I'm ready this week with some very small pliers, just to hopefully grasp the screw, yeah, and pop it safe by its box. So let's have a look. So if you look inside, R252 and then 010, it's actually matte inside, so there must be some sort of a spray finish on this to give it that sort of semi-gloss. But it's a beautiful little moulding, and the L.N.E.R, the 8477, all applied very nicely, and we've got those really nice white boiler bands. So I'll pop that down, and here we have a great example of an X04 that I was perhaps talking about in my last video. No felt pads visible at all on the bearings. So if you look at the rear bearing and the front bearing behind that clip, there's no felt. So this is a good sign that it's a later X04, still with the slightly well, with the normal type of brass worm and gear, with the closer gear teeth, not the plastic worm that we see on the later ones. Maybe we'll see one of those in a minute or two on another version of this, but a really clean chassis. So I'm just going to pop it down on the test track here and see whether there's any life in it. Hardly any. Well, it's starting. No. So that is straight out of storage, and more or less as I would expect. You can hear the controller going left to right there. It's got a little bit of life in it, but that needs a gentle recommissioning. But anyway, the 76 examples going there. So let's skip forward a year to 1977. So we've got exactly the same type of window box, exactly the same type of card with the extra number. So it's R2529330. And look, here we have R252, and this one, it's a very early 77, 12th of the 1st, 1977. So, are there any differences? Well, yeah, it's matte, isn't it? No shine on that one. I noticed that just picking it up then, these buffers, I think the plastic body shell has either just changed. I know buffers are very loose, so I mustn't lose those, but we'll take a quick look around it. virtually identical to the Loco we've just looked at. You can see I have run this one. There's grease on the main gear, so if I just pop that on the test track, I'm sure that's going to be no problem. No, that indeed is a very nice runner. So we've probably seen it on the layout before. Let me just move the polystyrene tray out of the way. So a really nice matte finish and identical otherwise, I think, to the 1976 one. So we've just got to change in colour. Now you'll see that that screw has probably been out a few times. This model is more well used, so I'm just going to see if I can spin out the little screw. And I think that screws in different places on the chassis are a good idea, but I've never really liked this sort of slightly through the boiler screw. Lots of scope for injuries to the Loco body with a slip screwdriver. Right, so off with the body. A quick look at the chassis where you can see my lubrication on the gears, and another really quite tidy later XO4 motor with no felt pads, but a great looking object. And I have run this on the layout a little bit of wear now on the wheels. Not very smooth, the plating on these wheels, but maybe that helps the grip. Virtually the same as the 76 chassis. Okay, let's come up to the latest model I've got, which is the 78, and as we saw earlier, very nice picture. Let's just get it out. So no evidence of any pricing, we've just got the cellophane window. But this is nice, isn't it? So R.252, and then it's 9301, so I guess that's an update of the sleeve. A shunting and light mixed traffic locomotive, typical of many small classes on the L.N.E.R, but it's a really nice picture, isn't it? Okay, so let's see if we can find a date on this one. So R.252, and we're a little bit later in 78. It's the 3rd of August 1978, and I'm not going to look through this paperwork. We've seen plenty of paperwork in the past, although I do think we've got some different operating instructions, so maybe it's worth just having a quick look. The 76 pamphlet there. Let's put 77. You know, they must have constantly been updating or reprinting these pamphlets, because that's different to that one. And then the latest one, let's just see if I can open it a bit. I'm sure they must have had a very busy department for drawing up all these wonderful pieces of paper. So this one, I think, virtually is the same as the 1977 one, but they have updated from 1976. So just a little bit of interest there. Always nice to have a look at the instructions occasionally just to see what's in them. Right, let's get to this later Loco. Let's pop it out of the box. And again, not so shiny as the 1976 version. I don't think any of these are painted. I just think there's a coat of varnish on the 1976 one. I think this is all coloured plastic. But look, if we turn it over, one big difference. Check out that gear. We do indeed have a much coarser plastic gear, which indicates that there'll be an XO3 motor in here. So I'm going to try and just spin out this screw. Now that one is a little bit tighter, so I'm just going to break the seal. I think I said in last week's video, it's always quite nice to keep them a little bit less than tight when you store the Locos to avoid distortion or problems. So there's the screw out. Let's get the body off. We'll come back to that chassis. Little bit of oil splatter on there, which I'll probably clean off with a cotton bud. Still the same, R.252, Hornby Railways, made in Great Britain. There is that 010 in there as well. Yeah, the buffers are loose on this one as well, so it must be just an age thing. So if you've got one of these, just keep an eye out, because it might be quite easy for them to fall out and get lost. But we've got the same running number and markings, and the really nice white bands and those bright little pieces of brass. And if you look, you can just see them coming through the body shell. So here's the main difference then. We've got the plastic worm on this, which means we're looking at the X03 motor. It doesn't look any different, does it? Well, if you have a look at it, you'll see it is different, because it's got bull racers in it. So this is one I've used before and shown you, and I've put a bull race motor in it. Right, let's just try it on the track then. A really nice runner. Now I wonder if I've got an original motor anywhere. Let me have a look. Let's just go onto the bench and let's just see what we've got here. Okay, well, this very well could be the one I took out of it. You can see that it's got some really nice red windings, and it's got the plastic worm, and you can see the original bearings have got no felt pads. Well, I think this is a good opportunity for me to take out my prototype motor and return this Loco to original. So I'm going to put this motor back in. I'll probably do that off camera. And then I think we'll run this 1978 example and the 1976 example on the main layout. Right, well, I've got the two little J.83s onto the layout, and I've got the later 1978 version coupled up to my gunpowder and firework train, so that's going to be good fun. In fact, let's get it out now. Just open up points G, and then I'm going to start driving it out. And with that excellent gear ratio of the plastic gears, it's great for pulling freight, so we can get some realistic freight train speeds, and it is indeed an improved gear ratio over the earlier model. Now, another excellent 060 Loco is the Ginty, which there's one on the upper section there. I think the J.83 is a little bit more refined, but another great small Loco that you can enjoy. And you don't need the biggest layout to run one of these. In fact, you can have just a bit of an end-to-end or make yourself a little shunting yard, especially the later X03 powered examples with the plastic gears. They're just good fun to use on short sections of track. Right, I think the time's come now to get the glossy version going. So 1976, here we come. And I'm going to run this one with a little bit more speed, I think. Got those two teak style L.N.E.R coaches on. Looks like a nice local service. Whisper quiet, this model. It's amazing how you can often get one straight out of the box that just seems to be quieter than the other ones. They are a little bit of a favourite, these J.83s. I quite often get them out for a quick run on the layout. Now, I don't know whether I mentioned just a minute ago, the packaging that we saw earlier in the video that it got R041. Well, I was getting my R numbers well and truly mixed up in my brain. 041 is indeed, I believe, the pannier tank, and the 048 number I was perhaps referring to, I think that's the London transport version. So there was a bit of a mix up in the old grey matter there, so apologies for any wrong information. Look at this whipping round the layout now. Lovely sounds from the wheels on the coaches, and just a great short train to run on the layout. I do enjoy running the longer rakes, but sometimes it's good running train set size items around, just 3 or 4 wagons or a couple of coaches. It's quite interesting looking at the development of a model over subsequent years. So I think a popular item in the range, but they decided to go from that slightly glossy finish down to a matte finish. They put the uprated motor in with the plastic gears. So the model did develop. I believe later even still might have been painted versions, but I haven't got confirmation of that because I don't own any. Well, I think it's a good excuse just for me to have a couple more minutes running these 2 Locos. I'm going to slow the passenger service down fractionally now and probably speed up the freight. Yeah, makes such a great noise. Let's see if we can capture it on the camera as it comes under the girder bridges. Just listen to this. So as I mentioned before, I think in next week's video we're going to take a look at that motor that came out of the streamlined Loco, the King George VI. See if there's any way of saving it without major surgery. And then I think we might take a look next week at a L.N.E.R Loco, something perhaps that we haven't either seen at all or for a while on the layout. So until then, I'm going to leave you with these 2 little 060 J.83 Locos, and for now I'll say goodbye.